Good morning. That's not going to get it. Good morning. Somebody, I think it was day one, they said it was bright up here. It is pretty bright. I am Steve Herndon. I'm a drug addict and alcoholic. And I want to thank, just realized I had the walk around mic. I want to thank Doug Edwards, Julie Lynn, the entire Vendham family for allowing me this opportunity. The very first morning that I was in this room, the lady that was sharing, her heart was all in it, and I couldn't stop thinking about the fact that, and Raymond, you just said it. There are people on the other end, the clients, patients, whatever we call these people. They're people just like myself, and there's a story behind that. And what I hope to do today is offer hope to all of you who work in this field that, recovery is possible, but the client has to do their part. And for me, my sharing, taking action, that's how recovery works in my life. At the core of who I am, and I'll say this regardless of who tells me to stop saying it, I'm a scared 5-year-old little kid. That's who I am. I'm a scared 5-year-old little boy, and I've got a hole in my soul. And I've been trying to fill it my whole life. It started out, with drugs and alcohol, and, it just went on and on and on. But that's who I am at the core. I've got a hole in my soul, and I was at on-site this past October, and what I realized was that I had been leaving this 5-year-old little boy behind my entire life. And I don't want to leave him behind anymore. I want to bring him up on this stage with me, and I encourage each and every one of you to come along with me on this journey. I thought I had an hour and a half. I was told I have an hour, so I'm going to do my best to try to make this thing work. Again, Steve Herndon, born and raised down in LaGrange, Georgia, which is about an hour south of Atlanta. Anybody in here from LaGrange? Okay. I was going to say, we might have to do the giveaway now. We've got a football giveaway. By the way, it's a 2001 Denver Bronco officially signed football that we're going to give away. Not right now, but I mean, if there was a LaGrange person in here, we would give it away now. I never knew my biological father, but I had heard that he was an alcoholic, but I knew I would never be like him, and we know how that turned out. Single mom. My sister's 13 months older than myself, and she was doing the best she could do, which I call it the fish sticks and food stamp plan. That's what it was. We were on food stamps, and we would have about 3 fish sticks to divide up between the 3 of us, and that was dinner. And so my mom would take us up to this convenience store, and she met this man behind the counter, and we thought like he was the best thing since sliced bread. He would give us quarters to go play Pac-Man, and we thought we'd hit the lottery, believe me. So she meets this guy, and within 2 months, they're married. Now, as a young man, 5 years of age, I was riddled with fear and anxiety. I have a mild form of Tourette, so if I start jumping around, don't think anything of it. But it's one of my co-occurring issues that tends to act out at times. I had a learning disability. So there was already a lot of stuff going on with me as a young man. And then here my mom marries this guy after she knew him for 2 months. And we were living in a 1-bedroom house. And believe me, it was nothing fancy. A lot of physical abuse, a lot of verbal abuse. It was a very traumatic childhood. And I didn't realize how traumatic it was until I got into therapy. And that's why, when I say I want to offer hope for everybody in this room is, don't stop what you're doing, because what you're doing works. You just got to give it an opportunity to work. But a lot of trauma as a young man, but that's not why I drank and drug. I drank and drug because I liked the way it made me feel. And I want to be real clear about that, so please don't get confused about that. What I was really looking for as a young man was I just really wanted to be validated. I wanted to be loved. And what I quickly learned was that sports was a big part of my life. And I loved every aspect of sports. But what I loved more than anything about athletics, especially football, was validation. And so what I really learned is that the harder I hit people, the more the coach liked it. And so I would get an attaboy and a pat on the butt. And it felt so good. It was like that first drink or drug. I mean, it was unbelievable. And I chased it and chased it and chased it. Attaboy! Hit him harder, hit him harder. And so next thing you know, I'm in middle school. I'm at was it Doak? We got any FSU people in here? No FSU? FSU, Doak Campbell, right? Doak Campbell's the name of the stadium. You would have got the football. Too bad. Moving right along. I walked into this stadium and I said, you know what? I think I can do. I want to do this. This is what I want to do. And for the next several years of my life, that's what I set out to do. Little did I know that it would turn into what it turned into. By the time I was a senior in high school, I was a top 100 recruit nationally. I could have basically written my ticket to any major university in the country. I had one little issue, though, believe it or not, and I know they talk about student athletes and how they're helped in college and whatnot. I promise I wasn't helped. But I did have one issue with getting into a major university, and that was the fact that I made a 490 the first time I took the SAT. And people say, well, you get 200 points for writing your name. Well, I didn't. Not the test I took. I earned all 490 of those points, I promise. But I would later be able to combine a couple of the test scores, and I got into the University of Georgia. I was going to Florida. We got any Gators in here? Okay, we got Bulldogs. There we go, Bulldogs. She's working hard for that football. I know she is. You just keep it coming. I was actually going to go to Florida. The coach left that was recruiting me, and so that's how I ended up at Georgia. And there's a lot of reasons why I ended up at Georgia. I also want to say, before I get too far along with what happened at Georgia, so I had a best friend. My best friend ever since middle school. We were going to be rappers, believe it or not. Two white kids from rural LaGrange, Georgia. We were going to be rappers and NFL football players. And it's a true story now. And I can vividly remember being in his garage with a mixer and a microphone, and that was it, nothing else. And we were going to make a record. Maybe there was something to that 490. I don't know. That was, but we had a plan. We had a plan. And more to be revealed. So I get to the University of Georgia. By the way, they recruited. We got any college football fans here, period, outside of Georgia? No, you will not get a football with a roll tide. That's a negative 10-pointer right there. We're okay, yeah, there we go. So it's just part of the culture, but I forget we're not in the South, We're in Denver, and so it's all about, out here it's a big deal to be a Denver Bronco. I spoke to University of Georgia football team 2 weeks ago, and I told those kids, I said, make no mistake, in this state, this is the professional team. It's not the Atlanta Falcons, and I know the difference. And the reason I know the difference is because I played for both teams. But anyway, I went on to the University of Georgia, and I was told that I would be home within a matter of months washing cars because I just wasn't smart enough. Well, what the test didn't prove, and what I want to tell any and everybody, especially when I'm talking to young kids, is that you can do anything that you put your mind to. Because what the SAT didn't prove is that if you spend 20 hours a week in study hall, you can pass, and you won't be home washing cars. And I had made a decision that I was going to do everything in my power to not be home washing cars within a matter of 2 months, as they said. So they talk about the recruiting process, and they talk about the whining and dining that goes on. And it was interesting, when I was talking to the team a couple weeks ago, I said, you need to be looking for signs and symptoms of your teammates, if not yourself, that maybe there's an issue. On my recruiting trip to Georgia, I morphed into a Power Ranger by drinking too much. That's a sign. If you turn into a Power Ranger the first time you drink, that's a sign that you may be an alcoholic. That's actually pretty funny. I really was a fire. And so I played with Coach Smart, and he was sitting in the back of the room. He's the head coach of the University of Georgia, for those of you that are not familiar with one of the greatest teams or schools in the university or in the country. Anyway, he said, I validate that because he remembers me turning into a Power Ranger. But, I wasn't going to be my biological father that I didn't know, because I wasn't a drunk. I had one bad experience. And, you set these rules and regulations about when and how you're going to drink, but make no mistake about it, I was a binge drinker throughout college. It's just the way it was. I mean, I played football, but I wasn't doing any drugs. And I was team captain. I was the Leon Farmer Strength and Conditioning Award winner. That's given to the player who dedicates the most to the program. So how could I possibly be a drunk? It just didn't make sense. 1998, that was the winter before my senior year. I happened to meet this lady in the back of a bar. And a buddy of mine came running to the front of the bar. He said, hey, man, you got to see this girl in the back. So I said, oh, yeah, I see her. She's like 6'1", 6'2". I see her. I said, I'll go back there and do my little dance. By the way, I can dance really well. If you want to see it later, I'll be happy to show you. I don't have my scarf. I can make a scarf disappear. That was kind of my thing. Anyway. Also, after 2 weeks of getting to know her, I was also urinating in public on a curb. And I looked back at her and I said, you're going to be the mother of my children. I'm sure you're curious to see how that turns out, right? But so I was telling you about this friend of mine, and we were going to be rappers and NFL football players. That's what we were going to do. And so in order for that to happen together, he would obviously have to come to the University of Georgia. Well, I struggled with the SAT, but he just struggled, period. So he came to Georgia and lived with me and partied. That's what he did. And again, not because I was beaten as a kid. That's not why I drank and drugged, and not because my friend who wasn't going to school came to Georgia and did a lot of drugs. That's not why I drank and drugged, but it was an avenue. I'll never forget the day. I had drank like a half gallon of Jim Beam, and my friend came to me and said, "Hey, eat this pill. I promise you will not be upset." And 2 hours later, I was not. I said, there he is. The sky parted, and God came down and said, it was the first hit of ecstasy, for those of you that are wondering. The sky parted, God came down and said, yes, son, you've arrived. And then 2 weeks later, I had some liquid acid. And the guy gave me a hit of it, and I said, no, you didn't give me a hit. I'm going to hurt you. I need more. And he was like, okay, here you go. Anyway, I had about 3 or 4 liquid hits of acid, and needless to say, I saw what hell looked like immediately. That was quite the experience. But being that the disease is cunning, baffling, powerful, wouldn't you know, within probably a week or two later, I'm doing acid again. And I think that just speaks to the nature of this disease. It's chronic, it's progressive, and it's fatal if left untreated. And I make no bones about it. In my taking action piece, I get a daily reprieve contingent on my spiritual condition. You know, before I came down this morning, I had a good hour's worth of meditation. And the reading this morning was all about, you know, God is the answer. And I'm going to get into that. So I met my future wife. This was going into my senior year. My senior year, there was a possibility that I was going to be like a third-round draft pick. And this was just unbelievable, that I was actually going to have the opportunity to play in the National Football League. I mean, this has been like a childhood dream of mine. Doak Campbell Stadium, FSU, I remember middle school. I was like, this is what I want to do. I also rationalized and justified my drinking behavior at the University of Georgia because not only was I team captain, not only was I Leon Farmer strength and condition, all that stuff, but I graduated in 4 years with a 3.3 GPA. Now, I don't know how you can do all that, but that's just how I managed, you know, and so that's how I justified what I was doing. I mean, I wasn't living under a bridge, and I had a motto, actually, and it was hoot with the owls, soar with the eagles. Anybody ever heard that? Anybody? That was my motto, and so, like, it was almost like the more I did it, the better I felt about myself. You know, it was like validating the fact that I am the best. Not only on the football field, but I'm going to out-drink you. I'm going to close the bar. And that fueled my addiction even more. Tore my shoulder up my senior year, middle of the season. Probably should have had surgery right then and there, but I didn't. And at the end of the year, Dr. Andrews, James Andrews over in Birmingham, he operated on it was a complete reconstruction, torn labrum, torn rotator, and he gave me a bottle of pain pills. And again, at this time, I was a binge drinker, and I'm just validating the progression of this disease right now. That's really what I'm trying to do with you folks. I was a binge drinker. I'd smoked a little bit of pot, but it wasn't an issue, and I'd eaten some ecstasy and had some acid. But these pain pills, whew. I'll never forget the bottle he gave me, and it was 90 Lortab in that bottle. And I thought, okay, you know, if one's good, two's got to be better, and then if two's better than 5, right? We can just multiply, keep going, right? But I was able to turn the switch on and off, and that's what, at least for me, that I didn't have it. I wasn't a crackhead, as they say, you know, under a bridge. 2 weeks ago when I was talking to the University of Georgia football team, I told those guys, I said, look, there's 90% of you in here saying, yeah, here's another crackhead going to tell us his sob story. And I said, the reason I know that is because I was at 90%. I was one of the 90% that was sitting in the room saying, here's another story about a crackhead who's, you know, fell to the bottom of the mountain and now he's trying to work his way back up. And that just wasn't the case. Ended up going undrafted, and I signed with the Miami Dolphins. A lot of people don't know that. That might have been a trivia question, but I signed with the Miami Dolphins, and I was what they call a high-priority free agent. So if you don't get drafted, you can pretty much pick where you want to go. And if you don't get drafted within the first 3 or 4 rounds, you might as well be a high-priority free agent. At least that's my version of the story. It doesn't sound better that way. I got to pick where I wanted to go. I don't know why I chose Miami. It was so hot down there. Wow, I thought Georgia was bad. And I was a notorious cramper anyway. So I got released immediately. I was with the Dolphins like 6 months. I was not physically healthy enough to play the game of football. I mean, I wasn't even close to where I was in high school. I couldn't bench press 130 pounds. And here I was, you know, trying to play football. But I got released from Miami, and I ended up, Shanahan had called me during the draft. Anybody remember when Coach Mike Shanahan was the Denver Bronco coach? Yeah, there we go. Shanahan's great, by the way. I love Coach Shanahan, and he was really good to me. So this was 2000. I ended up with the Denver Broncos, and they had a plan all along. But by the middle of the season in 2000, I was in rare form. I was playing as good as any lineman that we had with the Broncos. And that wasn't according to me. That was according to one of the veterans who was on the team. Julie, do we want to do the football now? So there's a trivia question. Now, this happens to be a 2001 officially signed Denver Bronco football. And the trivia question, now there's some rules here that we got to have because I don't want anybody to say, well, you cheated. The question is, and you have to raise your hand and you have to be accurate. The question is, who won the Super Bowl? No, this year. There you go. There you go. Let me see if he can catch it. Hey, there we go. Why was I a lineman, huh? Let's give it up for Wesley. Congratulations, young man. Congratulations. It's faded. I don't know why we use those pins that we use, but for whatever reason, the ball's faded. But it is an officially signed football. And at 3:30, there's going to be some more signings at the bookstore. I've got a lot of other cool stuff that we're going to be giving away. So join us at 3:30, and then tomorrow we're going to do the official jersey giveaway. Is that correct? Tomorrow at 11:30, I think. So anyway, 2000 was the year I was on the practice squad, and the Broncos, again, they had a game plan for me. They were going to send me over to NFL Europe, and then they were going to bring me back, and they were going to play me. And the NFL is really funny about how they do things, because I thought, well, if I'm ready to play, I'm ready to play. Like, why would I wait? Why would you guys wait? I had mentioned to y'all that I had a friend who was in the music industry, and we were going to be rappers, and we were going to be football players. And it's funny, it's comical, but the reality is you can do anything you put your mind to. In 2001, I started 3 games for the Denver Broncos after making it back from Europe, which Europe was unbelievable. As soon as I got there, I was like, where's the pharmacy? They didn't have pain pills, but they did have Ambien. And I learned very quickly that if you ate, 5 to 10 Ambien and stayed up, that it would do something for you. And so that was kind of my thing in Europe. But I get back from Europe, and my buddy, we actually shot the video right before I went to training camp in 2001. And my buddy had the #1 video on TRL. Anybody remember TRL? Carson Daly? He had the #1 song. And I started 3 games that year in the National Football League. Now, if I needed any reason to say, you know what, I can keep drinking and drugging, I had it. Because we did it. We did it. And as a matter of fact, for all the people that doubted us, these 2 white kids from LaGrange, Georgia, we joke and we say raised by the streets, but wasn't no concrete. Does anybody here understand what I'm saying? It was dirt roads. Like the first time I went to his house, I had to turn around. This was way before cell phones. I had to turn back around and drive into town. I called him. I said, hey, man, I think I missed your house. He said, oh, no, you were not even close. I mean, this guy lived out in the country. And to actually make it, it was just unbelievable. I'm starting in the NFL. He's on TV. It just fueled the ego. It fueled the addiction. 2002, I got married that off season to the lady that I told her that I said, you're going to be the mother of my children after 2 weeks. I knew it right away. She had everything that I didn't have. She had a loving family. Her dad is just a phenomenal human being. He was the dad that I never had. It was tough, 2002, we were living out in Denver together. I was pouting because I didn't get chosen as the starter. Although the guy that they gave the starting position to, there's a lot of politics in the NFL, believe it or not. He actually came to me and said, hey, man, you earned the starting position. but, politics are politics. And so I was pouting, and so I just started drinking and drugging more. And there, I'm going to try to stay away from the drug-a-log. There was a lot of drinking and drugging. At this point, I had tried to get my friend in the music industry off cocaine. I told him, I said, oh, you're just a wimp. I'll show you how to do it once and never do it again. Well, we know how that turned out. And so what happened was, we were playing Kansas City on the road. And I had been out up until the moment I got on the plane to fly to Kansas City. And obviously doing a lot of drugs and drinking. And wouldn't you know it, this guy that never gets hurt. Anybody remember Tom Nalen? He's all pro, all world center for the Denver Broncos when I played during that time period. He gets hurt in the third quarter, and I've got to go in the game. Is anybody here know? I tell you, we get some bonus points for. Is anybody here know who Max McGee is? Max McGee, the legend. So imagine, that was the Super Bowl, but remember he came in, it was Super Bowl I, and he tells the starting tight end, he says, don't get hurt, I went out all week, And long story short, Max McGee was the MVP of the Super Bowl. He had to play because the guy was sick or something. It was some crazy story. But Tom Nalen went down, and I had to go in the game. And I can remember it like it was yesterday. And, I've waited for this moment my whole life. And here I am pouting because I didn't get to start the job. I could tell you a lot about the NFL and my time there. And I do want to say that who would the Owls soar with the Eagles was my motto. And there were a lot of mornings where at 6:30 I'd snort something up my nose, and I'd go run 100-yard sprints at 7:30. There were a lot of those moments. 2003, I was hurt, and so fortunately I made the team. And then Alex Gibbs, who was the offensive line coach, ended up going to Atlanta. Well, guess what? I'm from Georgia. That seems pretty cool. It'd be awesome to go play for Atlanta. And so, it was hard. I drugged my wife kind of through the ringer of addiction at this point, and she's obviously not an addict or alcoholic, but I had just drug her through so much misery at this point. And she knew that when we got back to Atlanta, it was going to be a problem because my friend in the music industry was there, and just the two of us together is just an absolute recipe for disaster. So she said, hey, I got a plan. I'm going to draw up a contract that says no drugs. I was like, whatever, do what you want. That's fine. She drew up a contract. So we get back to Atlanta. The Falcons sign me. We buy a house. The guy who sold us the house takes me out the first night. Well, I wanted something white, and all he had was something that was crystal. And he said, I promise, just crush it up, snort it, you won't know the difference. Well, I knew the difference. There was a difference. And for the next month and a half, I was there in Atlanta trying to make the football team, and I was high on meth every day. That is the depth that my disease took me. And it wasn't even finished. I do want to say this. Besides the, snorting stuff at 6:30 and working out and running at 7:30, there was a defining moment in my career that I just can never get out of my head. I had chased my whole life the opportunity to play in the National Football League. And I remember playing for the Broncos, and it was in 2002. I started 9 games that year, and I remember being in Oakland Coliseum, and I remember getting in the huddle, and I would get in the huddle, and I would look at the quarterback, and all I could think about was getting home, cramming something up my nose, smoking something in my lungs, and pouring something down my throat. And I guarantee you, if we could see the TV copy, we could see me hitting the lineman on the way to the line of scrimmage, asking him what the play was. That is what this disease does, folks. I had chased this my whole life, and here I was. All I could think about was drinking and drugging. 2004, we go to Atlanta. I'm doing meth. Next thing you know, I get in an argument with my wife. I end up doing cocaine. Now, here's the other piece is you've got to be a real moron to get into the NFL substance abuse program, and that's something that I'm very passionate about. I love working in this field, and I love safety net recovery and all the things that I get to do with safety net, but I have a tremendous passion for working with players in the substance abuse program because there's such a problem that the NFL doesn't want people to know about, and it needs fixing. And I want to do everything in my power to fix it. So what happened was everybody know, all the players know when the test is coming. It comes once a year for substances of abuse. Now, steroids, that's all the time. You could go in any day and they could call you up and say, hey, you're getting tested today. But for substances of abuse, it's once a year. So with the Broncos, it was in training camp. So what do? You shut it down a couple months before training camp, you're fine. Nothing to worry about. Well, either you're really dumb or either you're very deep and dark in your addiction. And I was a little bit of both when I was in Atlanta. And we had OTAs because we had a new coach. And OTAs started in April, so the test was not in August, it was in April. Long story short, I tested positive for cocaine. So my wife left that very moment. She didn't physically leave. She didn't want to ruin the season for me, but she left. And believe it or not, I wasn't in recovery, taking action, working a program of recovery that was recommended. You know, they said, hey, you need inpatient treatment. You need to go to AA. And I said, yeah, kiss my ass. I'm going to do what I want to do, like I always done. So, but my wife did end up leaving. At the end of the year, she left. She said, I drew the contract. I made a commitment, and I'm going to honor it. And that's what I love about my wife, is she kicks my ass on everything when it comes to making a commitment and honoring your commitment. I wasn't in recovery working, taking action in recovery, but I was sober. And in 2004, call it coincidence if you want to, I don't. In 2004, I wasn't drinking and drugging, and I was one of 6 co-offensive MVP winners. We ended up playing the Eagles in an NFC Championship game that year, and I got an MVP trophy. They gave it to the 5 starters and myself because I backed up every position. Now, some might say there was a coincidence. I don't think so. Even though I wasn't working a program of recovery and taking action, I was sober, and there was something to that. You know, I vividly remember that moment of clarity. And who knows what could have been, but at this point, it's irrelevant, right? Because, you know, God had a plan for me. And so in 2005, my body just fell apart. And at this point, I was eating pain pills on a daily basis. And my limit was probably, 20, 30 Lortabs a day, whatever you want to break that down into milligram-wise. But it was a lot. I mean, just to be able to function in 2004, isn't this interesting? I'm talking about the fact that I wasn't drinking and drugging, but yet I was eating pain pills to play football. That's where I was at in my addiction. So in 2005, my career abruptly came to an end. I had knees, I had back issues, I had neck issues. And in 2005, my career was done, like overnight. And I was like, what am I going to do? Friend in the music industry called me. He said, hey, you always said that when you got done playing football, you were going to hit the road with me. I said, you're right. And as a matter of fact, you're addicted to Oxycontin, right? Yeah, well, just like in 2001, I got you off that cocaine, I'll get you off the oxys. We know how that turned out, right? 2005, I was up to about, it was an 80 oxy just to wake up and an 80 oxy just to go to sleep. And in between that, it was whatever it was. There was a Girls Gone Wild DVD and tour somewhere in there. And I don't think I need to say any more about the miracle that I am as I stand before you, the near-death experiences, the daily checking of the pulse, right? There was all that stuff. Typically, I just say the Girls Go Wild tour and everybody gets it. Like, yep, it was bad, real bad. That was a defining moment. At this point, though, I had reconciled with my wife. We were back together, and that was a wonderful thing because she's just been such a rock in my life. So what happened? The one dad that I had ever had in my life was my father-in-law. And we went to Canada. We were going to go detox in Canada with Ambien and alcohol. By the way, any detox centers use that? Just curious. Ambien, alcohol. If you are using it, you can stop. It doesn't work. That was our game plan, though. We were going to go to Canada, and we were going to, with enough Ambien and alcohol, we figured that we would not be dope sick. But what happened was we got very dope sick, and we tore the cabin up looking for pain pills. And the only man that had ever took me under his arms and it showed me any kind of attention and validation that I had been seeking my whole life was the man's pills that we found, and that was my father-in-law. So we get back to Atlanta, and my buddy says, he's going to treatment. I'm like, what? They're going to take away alcohol. I don't think you realize that. Like, they're going to say no drinking. Like, I'm not cool with that. I mean, I'm tired of drinking and drugging too, but like, no, I got to have my alcohol. He's like, man, I'm done. And so he went off to treatment. And the defining moment, I think, for both of us was after the Girls Gone Wild DVD, Joe Francis flew us to Vegas. And at Walmart, Target, all the big distributors for the clean version, they were there. And we were trying to sell them the DVD, obviously, to put in their store. And the defining moment for us was we were sitting in the Playboy suite that Joe had given us. He had given me the key earlier that night and said, here, I want you guys to enjoy the room. And that's a $60,000 a night suite. And we were both staring each other in the eye at 3 a.m, absolutely miserable. That's what this disease does, folks. Fortunately, I'm one of the lucky ones because there are two very close friends of mine that live with me in sober living who are no longer with us. You know, my age, guys my age, just like me, dead. So my buddy went to treatment. I said, I'm not going to treatment. 2 weeks later, the ninjas came out. There were 4 ninjas, I think, trying to climb into my house. Oh, that was weird. But I tell you what was really, really, really sad. Prior to the ninjas coming into the house that night, it was that weekend. It was the Tennessee game. And I left my wife in the stands to go get more cocaine. Literally, the game was over. I had no idea where she was at. And I'm just driving down the road, and I see her walking. I see her walking, and I say, get in. That's what this disease does, you know. It strips us of everything that we want to be. It strips us of everything that it's chronic, progressive, and fatal. That's what it is, folks. So I think at this point I validated my seat. Everybody heard the progression of the disease, and I was powerless. The unmanageability was all day, every day. You know, my life was beyond unmanageable. I had these little tricks where I would only use on the road, but then when I would get home, I'd tell my wife, hey, I want to grill something for you, so I could use the smoke from the grill. That's the reason my eyes are red excuse. which I used every time, right? So I ended up, October 14th, 2006 is when I got into Ridgeview. My family ran an intervention and drugged me to LaGrange, Georgia. Now, I had a stash like any good drug addict. I had some methadone, I had tons of pain pills, and I had a game plan, because I knew that day was coming. And that day showed up, and they took the pills. When you do a lot of cocaine for 2 weeks straight, you tend to sleep for 3 or 4 days, and that's what happened, and they found the stash. Now, some people say, well, that was a coincidence. No, that was God doing for me what I can't do for myself. And I truly believe that. And October 14th, 2006, I checked into Ridgeview Institute. And how I got there, believe it or not, was a guy named Dr. Earl Suttle. If you get an opportunity, pull him up. He's one of my mentors. He oversaw me when I was in the NFL substance abuse program. And I didn't know what else to do. I'm in LaGrange, I'm dope sick. I'm like, all right, this is it. Okay, you got me. As I'm still literally lying, like right up to the last minute where I just couldn't shiver anymore. Trying to tell my family that I didn't have a problem. And, called Dr. Earl, said, hey, what do I do? He said, go to Ridgeview Institute, ask for Tommy Richardson. Been my psychiatrist for the last 10 years. He had worked with the NFL. Just unbelievable people. Dr. Richardson said, you got to get this acronym down, and it's HOW. He said, you got to get honest in all your affairs. He said, you got to be open-minded. I said, well, I'm struggling with that one a little bit because it's been my way or the highway my whole life. And then finally he said, you got to get willing. And I said, okay. One of the things I love telling young men that I work with, and I ask myself this on a daily basis, is what am I willing to do that I'm not willing to do? When I talk about taking action, to me that's one of the biggest components to taking action. What am I willing to do that I'm not willing to do? Well, I'm willing to call my sponsor every day, but I'm not willing to go to meetings. Well, then I need to get willing to go to meetings. That's what I need to get willing to do. Or vice versa. And you can flip it around 1,000 different ways. But whatever it is that I'm struggling with when it comes to taking action, whatever I'm not willing to do, I need to get willing to do it. I got another one too that I really love, especially with these young kids. Hey, buddy, this ain't Burger King, and you can't have it your way. Huh? Is that good or what? These kids, but they want it their way, right? I want to pick and choose what parts of recovery I want to enjoy. Nobody said this was going to be easy, okay? Nobody said that. That's why I call it taking action the simple way. I try to make it simple, especially when I do lectures at treatment centers, because most people are doing the Thorazine shuffle anyway, and so if I could just get them to hear one thing. Every time I get opportunity to share my experience, strength, and hope, if one person leaves the room and it makes a difference, that's all that matters. That's all that matters. I got the opportunity to share my story about a week ago, actually. And the next day, a family member from Pennsylvania called me and said, hey, this guy heard your story the other night, and he wants some help. That's what it's about. That's what this thing is about. One of the biggest components for me, obviously, checked into Ridgeview, found my sponsor immediately. I heard this guy tell his story, the first Sunday night speaker meeting that they had every Sunday night. And this guy had multiple interventions, but the way he told the story was on the 8th intervention, he broke out of the straitjacket and wrecked the van. And I said, that's my guy. I like that guy right there. I said, that's a crazy dude, man. That is a crazy dude. Therapy's such a big component for me. Obviously, getting a sponsor, working the 12 steps, and having a spiritual experience, to me, that is how I find a God of my understanding. That helps fill that hole that I talked about that I've had in my soul my whole life. But there's so much more to it, and that's why therapy is so big for me. My wife's never met my therapist, but she loves him to death because of the work that he does with me. And she always knows. I try not to tell her just to try to get away with it. Like, hey, but she's like, "Do you go to therapy today?" I'm like, "Yep." She just said, "Yeah, I could tell." There's so many miracles to recovery, and there's so many ways that you can take action. But for me, it was getting a sponsor, working the 12 steps, having a spiritual experience, and going to therapy religiously. I told you folks in the very beginning, I never knew my biological father, but I had heard he was an alcoholic, and I would never be like him. I needed some answers. And so, being an impulsive, good drug addict and alcoholic, I left therapy one day and I said, "You know what? I'm gonna find my biological father." The number was unlisted. By the way, the number was unlisted. So I call. Actually, I asked my sister, "Did she want to help?" No, but she said, "Hey, I'll tell you where he's at." Well, unbeknownst to me, he worked 5 minutes from where Safety Net is located. I call, number was unlisted, but for some reason the operator connected me. Person on the other end, I said, "Can I speak to Timmy Smith?" And the guy on the other end said, "No, he's not here." May I ask who's calling? I said, "This is Steve Herndon. I'm looking for Timmy Smith." He said, "Oh my God, you're my half-brother. I've been looking for you my whole life." Now to me, folks, that's taking action. That's taking action. You know, I can talk to you all day about get a sponsor, work the 12 steps, have a spiritual experience, get a God of your understanding. I can talk to you all day about that stuff. But for me, it's been all the action that I've taken with my therapist that have really produced results and the promises coming true for me. Now, all I ever knew was that he was an alcoholic. So what do I think? My whole life, I think, man, this guy's living under a bridge, you know? As I'd heard all the horror stories about how he had beat up policemen and he was just a terrible drunk. About a month later, I met him. And we met at this barbecue place. If you ever come visit Safety Net, I promise we'll go to this barbecue place. We sat and cried for 20 minutes. But if I hadn't taken that action, you know, I feel so sad for my sister because she has that opportunity, but she's just not willing to take the action. It breaks my heart because I'm like, you're missing out on so much. And it wasn't perfect, but at least I have answers today. At least I have answers. Father's Day that year, we're sitting in the car. My biological father says, "My whole life, I thought you were going to track me down and hurt me." I said, "I want you to know if we both die on the way home, you're a great man and I love you." If I hadn't taken the action that I took, that would have never happened. So what am I willing to do that I'm not willing to do? These are the miracles of recovery, folks. You do it every single day. Don't stop. I know it gets frustrating. I know it gets hard, but these are the miracles that we work for. You know how precious it is to see the light come on, much less to hear how deep some of this stuff goes. So I have a relationship with my biological father today. You know, we see each other a couple times a year. Now, I told you I had a lot of stuff going on when I was a young kid, but I didn't realize how much of that was trauma and what exactly to do with it. My therapist, was the one who really taught me what that was about. It's not that the sponsor couldn't teach me that, but it was the therapist who really explained that to me, like it wasn't okay that you were beat on. Are you aware of that? It took a therapist to tell me that. You know, and then my mom and sister, of course, I bring him into one of the group rooms, and I say, you know what Daddy did to us wasn't okay. And they're like, what are you talking about? He did the best he could. You know, to be stripped of that, it was just like. So, what other action is there to take? Well, for me, I had a mom who was everything to me. I talked to her every single day of my life. Well, many of you experts in this room know that as what? Codependency? And what was really sad was my therapist said, you got a lot of work to do around that. You're going to have to break that codependency. This is the woman who raised me and my sister when we had nothing. And to call her and say, hey, we can't talk every day anymore. Why was that so crucial? That was so crucial because prior to me realizing that, I had never been a husband to my wife. Never. Because why? Because I was a husband to my mom. Because she had never had any emotional stability. So because of the action that I was willing to take with my therapist, I went there. I set some boundaries, very healthy boundaries with my mom, and it's still very tough to be around my family because of the codependency, because it is like a death. It's truly like a death. But I finally got to be a husband to my wife. I got to be the husband that she so desperately deserved. But it was all about, taking action. And it was 13 months, folks, of therapy twice a week before I was emotionally intimate with my wife. It was 18 months before we were actually physically intimate. It was a whole new courtship. But it was because of some things that I was willing to do. I was willing to take some action in some areas of my life. Which, by the way, I didn't tell you the last thing I told my wife when my parents dragged me out of my house after she called them because she thought I was dead, was I said, when I find you, bitch, I'm going to fucking kill you. Now, she let me sit in treatment for 30 days with no phone call, and deservedly so, right? I mean, I think I earned that one. But it's the miracles of recovery that if you're willing to take the action, miracles happen and miracles take place. Like the relationship I have with my wife today. Like the 6-year-old boy that I have as a son. The 4-year-old daughter. The 2-year-old boy. Because of the action that I was willing to take, I have miracles in my life today. Now, I could have worked the steps and had a spiritual experience and got my understanding and just stood here and told you about those things and those things only. But it was the therapy and the other pieces and components that gave me so much more of a fulfilling life that I never dreamed possible. I have a relationship today with my wife I never dreamed possible. I have 3 amazing, beautiful children that I never even thought that was a possibility. And this is the same woman that's been with me the whole time. I see the clock's ticking down, so we got some more to cover. I could go on and on and on, but I really want to tie up some loose ends. It's so imperative that we in the recovery industry start to bridge the gap between treatment and what we call aftercare or sober living or recovery residence, whatever terminology you want to use. It's crucial. It's crucial because people get sober not because they get stable in treatment, and please don't take what I'm saying the wrong way. Treatment is stabilization. Recovery happens in call it aftercare. what I call sober living recovery residence, because that's when you get a sponsor, you work the steps, and you have spiritual experiences, and you have time for therapy. Because this wouldn't have happened in 90 days of therapy, the miracles that I'm talking about, finding a biological father, having a relationship with a wife that I never dreamed possible, and 3 beautiful children. There was another thing that happened during my time in sober living, and I think is so crucial. So you might in here look in the bag and see I think it was the Addiction Pro book, and you saw my picture. Did anybody see that book? Yes? Yay, some people did. There you go. So the guy next to me is a guy named Taylor Hagan, and he just so happens to be my business partner. And in treatment, we met, and I saw this guy, and he was doing I thought the fact that I had played in front of 100,000 people made me have, I don't know, what, for lack of a better term, a sack. I thought I had that, and I was like, no, I don't, because I saw this guy do some corny stuff. He got in front of so the whole treatment center would get together on Sunday night or something, and he got with this girl, and they were doing Rock On Recovery, like the Addams Family thing. And I looked at this guy and I said, now this guy right here's got what I want. Well, we get into sober living, and I'm all in. I'm on my 4th step. I'm at the kitchen table. I'm all in. I'm ready. I'm take on the world. This guy hits a clinical depression. Now, mind you, the picture you saw in the back of that book, he did not look like that at the time. And I also looked much bigger. I was 300 pounds. He was 150 pounds. So I was twice as big as him. I was getting him drug tested. Why? Because I thought he was using. Why? I mean, what else would he be doing? I didn't know anything about clinical depression. So he asked the guy why he was being drug tested the way he was. And the guy that was doing the check said, hey, you need to go talk to the big boy out there. So he comes running out. He said, get your big ass up. I'm like, this is going to be quick. He said, man, you're a snitch, man. He said, why can't you come talk to me, man? Why can't you come talk to my face? He said, you're getting me drug tested. I said, man, I've been trying to talk to you for 2 weeks, and you ain't heard a word I've said. And in that moment, I'm sitting there thinking, am I going to step on his foot and then punch him in the chest and watch his head bounce off the ground? Or am I going to hit him in the nose, right? That's really what I'm thinking about. And there's some people in here who know the guy personally and know exactly what I'm talking about because they've heard this story. But because I was willing to take action, you know what happened that day? God reached his hand down and said, this guy needs love. And I grabbed him and I pulled him in as tight as I could. And if you get a chance to hug me later, I'll show you how tight it was. And I said, I'm scared you're going to die. I love you and I don't want you to die. And that day, the 2 men in the net and safety net was born. That's because I was willing to take some action. At the end of the day, I could go on and on about the miracles of recovery and the action that I've taken in my life. But there's one last little piece that I want to tell you about. Because I've talked to you about filling that hole in my soul, and I tried to do it with drugs and alcohol. I tried to do it with football, and none of those things filled that hole. None of it filled it. But when I got a sponsor, worked the 12 steps, and had a spiritual experience and a God of my understanding, I had a solution to start filling that hole. And I get a choice every single day to do that. When I was in sober living, I had my mom send me a bunch of pictures, and I got 1 minute, so I see it wrapping up. I had my mom send a lot of pictures of me as a young child, which was not very many because we were really poor, right? So, we didn't have a camera. But I did take one of those pictures, and I looked at it, and I thought, that poor kid has really, really been drugged through the ringer. And I said, that poor kid did not have a choice. I said, but today, I get to make a choice to take action in my life and in my recovery so that kid never has to go back to that life that he lived before. And I want to tell each and every one of you today, don't give up hope. Keep doing what you're doing so that guys like me can take action. Thank you and God bless.